Hadn't planned on coming home for Christmas this year. Honestly, the only reason I booked the flight was because my sister called me 3 days before Christmas and said Mom cried when she saw my name missing from the group chat invite for dinner. That, and my guilt threshold still hasn't hardened enough to ignore a "your dad keeps asking about you" comment. So I flew back. Middle seat, delayed flight, the usual. It was already snowing when I landed. Thick, wet flakes that stuck to everything. As the cab turned onto our street, a weird knot formed in my stomach. I stared out at the houses, all lit up, covered in strings of lights and inflatable snowmen, and felt detached, like I was watching someone else's hometown. The second the cab pulled up, the door swung open. My sister Meg grinned like she'd just won a bet. "Thought you were bluffing." "Guess I still liked a surprise," I said, stepping into the cold and hugging her with one arm, suitcase in the other. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. The entry rug with the corner always curled up, the scent of cinnamon candles. My mom, halfway into decorating her third batch of sugar cookies. My dad, asleep on the couch with the football game playing at full volume. And my room still had the same posters I put up in high school. Like time had hit pause the second I left. I was halfway unpacking my duffel when Meg appeared in my doorway, doing her classic fake casual lean. "So, guess who's coming to dinner tomorrow night?" I didn't look up. "If you say Jamie, I swear." "Wow, psychic now?" I sighed and dropped onto the bed. "Why would he even come? He's still close with Mom and Dad, you know that. He hasn't texted me, not once. Since he kissed you in his garage and then ghosted you?" she said, blunt as ever. I winced. "Thanks for that." "Look," she said, softening a bit. "He's not bringing a date. I made sure." "You really asked?" Meg shrugged. "I'm invested. Sue me." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The second she walked out, I was right back in that memory from 2 years ago. Christmas Eve, his parents, place. The garage door half open to let the smoke from the fire pit out. We were laughing, drunk on eggnog and nostalgia, arguing about which Home Alone was better. Then he leaned in. Just out of nowhere, his hand on my jacket, his mouth on mine. Slow. Hesitant. Like he didn't know what would happen if he did it, but decided to do it anyway. And I kissed him back. Of course I did. But the next morning, it was like it hadn't happened. He went back to normal. Said we were drunk. Laughed it off like it meant nothing. So I left. And I hadn't come back since. Now, 2 years later, I was back in my childhood bedroom, wondering if he remembered that kiss as clearly as I did, or if he ever thought about it at all. The next day passed in that weird Christmas haze where everything moves both too fast and painfully slow. My mom was on a cooking mission, and every time I stepped into the kitchen, she handed me something to chop, stir, or just taste for salt. It was comforting in that chaotic way holidays tend to be. But I kept checking the clock. Every hour that ticked closer to dinner made my chest feel tighter. I hadn't seen Jamie in 2 years. Not even by accident. He'd stayed here in our town while I moved across the country for work. The last time we talked was a single text he sent after New Year's that just said, "Made it weird. Sorry." I didn't reply. By 6, the house smelled like cinnamon-glazed ham, roasted garlic, and sugar cookies. My mom was already humming along to the same Christmas playlist she played every year. Meg was upstairs curling her hair for no one in particular. And I stood at the mirror in my childhood bathroom, changing my shirt for the 3rd time. I hated that I cared this much. I heard the knock before anyone else did. It was soft, barely audible over the music. Then came the unmistakable sound of my dad's cheerful, "Well, look who it is!" My body froze. I stayed in the bathroom for another 30 seconds, staring at my reflection. I looked tired, slightly flushed, nervous. I finally forced myself out and walked down the stairs. Jamie was standing in the living room, holding a bottle of red wine like a polite guest. He was talking to my mom, nodding and laughing at something she said, looking exactly the same and somehow completely different. His hair was shorter than I remembered, neater. His shoulders looked broader under the heavy knit sweater he wore, a deep forest green that matched the color of his eyes. He turned as I stepped into the room. Our eyes locked. It was one of those moments that lasted too long to be casual, but too short to hold on to. He smiled first. "Hey." "Hey," I said, trying to sound like I wasn't screaming internally. Jamie crossed the room like we hadn't skipped 2 years of awkward silence and gave me a hug that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. "You look good," he said quietly as we pulled apart. "Yeah, you too." And just like that, we were surrounded by people again. My mom asked Jamie to open the wine. My dad turned up the music. Meg came bounding down the stairs, pretending not to watch us while watching us. Dinner was a blur. We sat across from each other. I caught him looking at me more than once, and every time I did, he didn't look away. He was relaxed, at ease, like none of it was strange, like we were just friends catching up. But I wasn't relaxed. I kept thinking about that night, the way his hand had curled around my jacket, the warmth of his breath, the way his lips trembled slightly against mine like he was terrified but couldn't stop. I kept wondering if he remembered. And then, finally, after dessert and coffee and everyone slipping into that slow post-meal daze, he leaned over the table and said, "Want to go for a walk?" I didn't hesitate. Yeah. The cold hit us the second we stepped outside. The snow was still falling, light now, soft flakes swirling in the glow of the porch light. We didn't say anything at first, just walked. Our boots crunched against the icy sidewalk. The whole street was lit up with Christmas lights, houses glowing with that familiar hometown warmth that made everything feel smaller, simpler. After a block, he said, "I wasn't sure if you'd come back." I shrugged. Neither was I. Jamie stuck his hands in his pockets. "I didn't think I'd see you again, honestly." I stopped walking. "Yeah, well, you didn't really give me a reason to." He turned toward me, his breath visible in the cold air. "I know." Silence. Then, softly, "I was scared." I looked at him. Really looked at him. "I was drunk that night," he went on, "but I wasn't that drunk. I remember all of it. I remember how you kissed me back. And I remember waking up and realizing I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do with that." I crossed my arms against the cold, partly to keep warm, partly to protect whatever this strange thing between us was. "So what changed?" I asked. Jamie looked down at the snow, then back at me. "You coming back?" He took a slow step forward, and I didn't move. "I've thought about that night more times than I want to admit," he said. "But I told myself you were better off without me, that I messed it up." "You did," I said. "You ghosted me." "I know." "Another step. I never stopped thinking about you," he said, and this time his voice cracked just a little. I just didn't think I'd get another shot. I don't know if it was the cold or the emotion in his voice, but my chest tightened, my throat went dry. I wanted to be angry, but I wasn't. I just felt pulled, like gravity was realigning itself. I took one step toward him, just one, and that was enough. His hand found mine, and we stood there on the sidewalk in the middle of our childhood street, fingers tangled, the snow falling softly around us. Not saying anything, just letting it be what it was. We didn't go back inside right away. We just kept walking, holding hands like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like we hadn't spent the past 2 years pretending that kiss never happened. Like we were still those same 2 kids who used to race their bikes down this same street, daring each other to ride with no hands. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was thick with everything we hadn't said, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt overdue. Jamie squeezed my hand. "This feels weird." "Which part?" I asked. "All of it," he said, "but also not weird at all." I glanced at him. "Yeah, I get that." We made it to the park at the end of the street, the little one with the frozen-over pond and the picnic benches that always leaned too far to one side. There was no one around. Just snow, and the dull orange glow of the street lamps reflecting off the ice. We sat on the old swings, side by side, letting our boots drag lines in the snow. Jamie looked over at me like he was working up to something. "You dating anyone?" I shook my head. "No, you?" He smiled a little, but there was no humor in it. "Tried. Didn't work out." "Why not?" He took a moment before answering. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." That landed somewhere deep in my chest. I wanted to respond, but I didn't know how. So instead, I asked, "Do you remember exactly what you said to me after that kiss?" Jamie leaned back on his swing, looking up at the sky. "I said we were drunk, and it didn't mean anything." "Yeah, I lied." We sat there, letting that settle. The snow had started again. Light flurries that caught in Jamie's hair dusted his sleeves. After a while, he stood up, brushing snow off his jeans. "I should probably head home. My mom's waiting on me." I nodded, suddenly feeling that ache in my chest again, the one I'd carried with me for the past 2 years. But before he left, Jamie stepped in front of me and gently touched the side of my face. "I want to see you again before you fly back." "I'll be here all week." "Good." His fingers lingered for a second, longer than necessary. Then he pulled away and smiled. "Merry Christmas," he said. And with that, he turned and walked off into the snow. I sat there a long time after he was gone, feeling warm, despite the cold. Christmas Day. The next morning was all laughter and coffee and wrapping paper. I tried to be present. I really did, but part of me kept drifting, thinking about Jamie, wondering if last night was real or just some snow-glazed dream I was bound to wake up from. After breakfast, Meg cornered me in the hallway with a cup of cocoa and one eyebrow raised. "So, what's up with you and Jamie?" I hesitated. "Nothing's official." She smirked. But it's not nothing either." She patted my arm. "About damn time." The day passed slowly. I kept checking my phone, but Jamie didn't text. I told myself he was with his family, that it was Christmas, that maybe he didn't want to push too hard. But by early evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat. Going for a walk, I said to no one in particular. It was just past 6 p.m. when I made it to his house. I hesitated at the edge of the driveway, heart racing. I almost turned around, but then the front door opened, and there he was, like he'd been waiting. "You came." "You didn't text," I said. Jamie looked sheepish. Didn't want to seem too eager. "I was hoping you'd seem eager." That made him smile. "Well, in that case." He stepped aside, holding the door open. Inside was warm, dimly lit, and smelled like pine and something sweet. Gingerbread, maybe. His parents weren't around, or if they were tucked away in another room. Jamie led me upstairs, not saying a word. I followed. And when we got to his room, he shut the door gently behind us. His room hadn't changed much either. Same faded blue walls, same posters, vintage concert prints, old movie art, a few framed Polaroids pinned haphazardly near his desk. The bed looked neater than I expected, like he'd made it just for this. I stood awkwardly by the door, hands still in my coat pockets, trying to ignore the thunder of my heartbeat. Jamie turned around to face me, his expression soft but unreadable. "You warm enough?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah." He stepped closer. "You sure?" His voice was quiet, not teasing, not joking. My mouth felt dry. "I'm not cold." Jamie hesitated for half a second. Then he reached out and touched the lapel of my coat, fingers curling into the fabric. "You kept your distance for a long time," he said. "You told me to. I was wrong." We stood there, only a few inches apart, the air between us buzzing with something that hadn't been there since we were kids. Or maybe it had always been there. Maybe we just never known what to call it. I reached up and touched his wrist lightly. "So what now?" He exhaled, eyes flicking from mine to my mouth. Now I stopped running from it. And just like that, he leaned in and kissed me again. This time wasn't like the garage. This time wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was deliberate, steady, like he meant every second of it. My hands found the sides of his face, the stubble along his jaw scratching softly against my skin. He pulled me closer, his arms sliding around my waist, and I felt his whole body melt against mine, like he'd been holding himself up for 2 years and was finally letting go. We kissed like we'd been waiting for this, like we'd rehearsed it in our minds and were finally getting the real thing. When we broke apart, we were both breathless. Jamie rested his forehead against mine. "I never should have shut you out. I never should have let you," I whispered. He smiled against my cheek. "You're still stubborn. You still think you're smooth." He laughed. "Okay, that's fair." We stood there, tangled in each other, letting the silence fill the gaps. There was nothing left to say, at least not for now. Eventually, we moved to the bed. Not for anything serious. Not yet. We just lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed, side by side, his arm draped loosely over me. It was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was back in someone else's life. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Somewhere around midnight, I stirred, still half asleep, and realized Jamie was watching me. His hand was resting against my chest, fingers splayed out gently like he was grounding himself there. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Didn't want to." I blinked at him. "Why?" He traced a small circle on my shirt with his fingertip. "Because if I fall asleep, this might feel like a dream." "It's not," I said. "I'm here," he smiled. "I know, but I don't want to blink and miss any of it." Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, 2 boys who had once grown up next to each other, and then apart, finally found their way back to something that had always been there. Maybe this wasn't the Christmas I planned, but it was the one I needed, and I was starting to think it might be the beginning of something much bigger than either of us expected. I didn't go back home that night. We didn't say it out loud, didn't make a big deal out of it, but neither of us moved when the clock passed 1 a.m., then 2. Eventually, Jamie got up, turned off the lights, and came back to bed without saying a word. He just slid under the blanket next to me, pulled it over both of us, and settled in like it was the most natural thing in the world. And somehow, it was. I'd expected to lie there, wide awake, caught in my thoughts. But the second I felt his arm wrap around me again, my body finally exhaled. I fell asleep to the sound of his breathing. In the morning, I woke up before he did. The room was pale and full of soft winter light. Snow still fell in slow, lazy flakes outside the window. Jamie was on his side, one hand tucked under his pillow, his face relaxed in a way I don't think I'd ever seen before. I just watched him for a while. Maybe it was weird, maybe it was way too sentimental, but something about waking up next to him like that made everything click in my chest. It didn't feel rushed, it didn't feel confusing, it felt like we'd finally stopped pretending. When he stirred, eyes blinking open slowly, his gaze met mine and he smiled, sleepy and unguarded. "Morning. Hey." There was a pause. Then, "Still here?" "Yeah." "Good." He reached over and pulled me closer. And we just lay there like that, tangled up under the blanket, while the rest of the world stayed quiet. Eventually, we had to get up. He offered me coffee. We took turns brushing our teeth at the sink like a couple who'd done it 100 times before. I borrowed a hoodie of his, gray, soft, worn in, and we laughed about how ridiculously domestic it all felt. But then came the hard part. "I should head back," I said. Jamie nodded, but didn't look thrilled. "Yeah, probably. I mean, not because I want to." "I know," I looked at him. "So what do we tell people?" He ran a hand through his hair, thinking, "Do we have to decide that today?" "No," I said. "But eventually," he nodded. "We'll figure it out." Before I left, he kissed me again. Not quick, not casual. The kind of kiss that makes you feel like you're walking away with something you never had before. Back at home, my sister took one look at me walking through the door in someone else's hoodie and raised both eyebrows. So, I tried to act casual. So what? Meg crossed her arms. Don't make me pry it out of you. Did you guys talk? Or did you just make out and pretend everything's fine now? I gave her a look. We talked. And we're figuring it out. Meg actually smiled. Soft, supportive. Good. Then she pointed at the hoodie. You're not subtle, by the way. I wasn't trying to be. That afternoon, Jamie texted me. My mom says hi. Also, she asked if I was in love with you. I said maybe. Hope that's okay. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Depends. Are you? A minute passed. Then, yeah. I think I always have been. I didn't even hesitate. Me too. Jamie and I didn't exactly make a plan. There was no dramatic announcement, no, we need to talk, dinner. It started slow, natural. Just a hand brushing against mine a second too long while we stood side by side. A look shared across the room. Little things. But you'd have to be blind not to notice something had changed. My mom caught on first. We were both helping her clean up after dinner. Jamie rinsing dishes, me drying, and she stopped mid-sentence to just look at us. Not in a bad way, just observant. You boys seem close again, she said, eyebrows raised slightly. Jamie chuckled, not looking up. We've always been close. Mom nodded slowly. That was all she said, but I could feel the wheels turning in her head. The next day, Meg cornered me in the garage. Again. You know you're basically glowing, right? She said, tossing me a bag of rock salt to keep in my car. Glowing? Yeah, like you're either newly in love or pregnant. Definitely not pregnant, she smirked. So, love? I rolled my eyes, but I didn't deny it. It's still early. Sure, she said, nudging me, but you're not fooling anyone. Later that evening, Jamie texted me. Want to come over? Got the place to myself for a couple hours. 5 minutes later, I was putting on boots and grabbing my coat. When I got there, he opened the door already smiling. You walked? It's like 3 blocks. You could have frozen to death for me. I stepped inside, stamping snow off my boots. Would have been worth it. He pulled me in by the collar of my jacket and kissed me before I even got both shoes off. We stumbled back into the hallway, laughing between kisses, that giddy kind of energy bubbling up that felt too rare to let go of. He pushed me gently against the wall, kissing me deeper now, slower. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. He looked at me for a long second and then said something I didn't expect. I want to tell people, I blinked. Tell who? Everyone, friends, my mom, I'm done hiding. My chest tightened in the best way. You sure? He nodded. I've spent too long pretending I didn't feel something for you. I'm tired of it. I want to be with you for real. I swallowed. Me too. That was all it took. We told his mom first. She barely blinked. Just smiled and said, well, it's about time, before pouring herself more tea and asking if we wanted dinner. It was almost anticlimactic, but kind of perfect. Later that night, back in his room, I sat on the edge of his bed while he rummaged through a drawer. What are you doing? I asked. Looking for something. What? He turned around and tossed something at me. A folded sheet of paper. I opened it. It was a photo from high school. The two of us, arms around each other, mid-laugh, cheeks red from the cold. It must have been winter break, maybe sophomore year. We looked so young. I kept it, he said, sitting next to me. Back when I didn't know what any of this meant, I just knew that picture made me feel something. I ran my fingers over the faded edges. I remember that day, I said. You dared me to slide down that frozen hill on a trash can lid. You did it. I sprained my wrist, and I carried you home. We both laughed. Then he got quiet again. "I think part of me knew back then," he said, "even if I didn't want to admit it." I looked at him. "I think I did too." He reached out, took my hand. "I want to make this work," he said. "Not just while you're here, long distance, FaceTime, visits, whatever it takes." I didn't even hesitate. "Okay," I said. "We will." And we sat there, side by side, holding hands and looking down at a photo of two boys who had no idea what the future held, but somehow still ended up right here. The day before I was set to fly back, Jamie and I took a walk. It had become our thing, bundling up, no real destination, just wandering the snow-blanketed streets of the neighborhood we both grew up in, talking about the future like it was something we finally had permission to imagine. We passed the old park again, the same one where we'd sat on the swings a few nights earlier. "I used to come here a lot after you moved," Jamie said, kicking at the snow. "Didn't even realize I was looking for something familiar." I nodded. "I get that." After that kiss in your garage, I thought about coming back just to talk. But I didn't want to make it worse. He looked over at me, eyes soft. I would have listened. I wasn't sure. "Now you are," he said. Not a question. "Now I am." We kept walking. That night, my family had everyone over for one last round of Christmas leftovers. Neighbors, old friends, even Jamie's mom stopped by. It was loud and cozy, the house filled with chatter and the smell of reheated stuffing and peppermint bark. Jamie stood beside me, a hand casually resting at the small of my back, his touch so subtle that no one would notice unless they were looking for it. But Meg noticed. She gave me a tiny nod from across the room like a silent thumbs up. Later, as the crowd thinned out and the evening quieted down, Jamie pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I know you're leaving tomorrow," he said, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was nervous. "But I don't want this to feel like something that only exists in winter, or something we forget about when we're apart." "It won't be," I said. "I don't want it to be either." He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small box. No wrapping, no bow, just him being him. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a silver keychain, nothing fancy. Just a simple little metal tag with one word engraved on it. "Stay." I looked up at him, heart full. "I know you have to go back," he said. "I'm not asking you to stay right now. I want you to know I'm in this, however long it takes. I'll visit, I'll call, we'll figure it out. Just don't disappear again." I didn't say anything at first. Just closed the box, stepped forward, and kissed him. Deep, slow, meaningful. Then I pressed my forehead to his and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, we stood by my gate at the airport. He looked tired, sad, but underneath it all, steady. "We're gonna be okay," I said. Jamie nodded. "I know." I hugged him tight. When I let go, he smiled and said, "I'm coming to visit in 2 weeks." "You already booked it?" "No," he said, "but I'm going to the second I get home." I shook my head, laughing as I turned to leave. And as I walked toward security, I reached into my pocket and ran my thumb over the metal keychain. Stay. Funny thing was, I wasn't really leaving anymore, because for the first time in a long time, I had something to come back to, someone. That Christmas, I came home expecting awkward silences and small talk. Instead, I found him, and this time, we were ready to get it right.